The galaxy was vast, cold, and filled with unknown dangers. Among the countless stars and planets, one fleet drifted silently, stranded in the far reaches of space. It was the Zareth Union, a mighty empire of aliens who had once ruled the stars with their unmatched technology and power. But now their once glorious armada was powerless, adrift in a sector no one had ever bothered to map properly. Their advanced star drives had failed, and their communication systems were damaged beyond repair. With supplies running low and hope fading, the Zareth fleet commanders knew they were on the brink of extinction. Days turned into weeks, and still no response came to their distress signal. The dark void of space echoed with silence, and they began to accept their fate. But then, on the edge of the Armada's sensor range, a strange signal appeared. It was faint at first, like a whisper across the emptiness of space, but it grew louder with each passing moment. The signal was simple, unencrypted, and completely unfamiliar. No codes, no military encryption, just a basic communication that seemed almost primitive. It came from an old-style human cargo ship, a ship that should have been nowhere near the Zareth fleet. The message was strange, unusual even. It was cheerful, almost carefree, a stark contrast to the grim situation of the Zareth. The humans were offering help. At first, the Zareth commanders laughed at the idea. Humans, a species barely known beyond their own star system. What could they possibly offer? It seemed like a joke, but in their desperate situation, they had no choice but to investigate. When the human ship, SS Morningstar, finally arrived and docked with the flagship of the Zareth fleet, the scene was nothing short of bizarre. No demands, no negotiations, just a group of humans, unarmed, smiling, and holding toolkits. They stepped off their ship and onto the Zareth vessel like they were visiting an old friend, offering to help without asking for anything in return. Captain Eli Turner, a quiet but determined man, led the small crew of humans who had come to rescue an entire alien armada. The Zareth officers were stunned, their minds struggling to process what was happening. These humans were different. They were not the invaders they had expected, nor were they the desperate survivors they had feared. They were simply people offering help. And in that moment, the Zareth realized they might have underestimated the human species. The humans worked quickly, diagnosing problems with the star drive, the food processors, and even the aging life support systems. Their methods were unconventional, often using technology that seemed out of place among the advanced machinery of the Zareth. But they were effective. With a combination of creativity and basic tools, the humans started fixing things that the Zareth engineers had given up on. Their solutions were not the most sophisticated, but they worked. Within hours, the core systems that had been failing for weeks began to hum with power once again. The Zareth officers couldn't believe their eyes. How could these primitive humans, the stars were dim in the distant part of the galaxy, where the mighty Zareth fleet was stranded. For weeks, they had struggled against the cold, empty void of space, their once proud armada now helpless and adrift. Their star drives were broken, and communications with their home planet were lost. As they drifted further into the unknown, their supplies began to run out, and the once sturdy fleet started to show signs of wear. The Zareth officers had given up hope. They were certain they were doomed to die in the vast, endless dark. They were powerful warriors, with technology far beyond anything other species had, yet here they were, helpless. Their greatest minds had failed to fix the star drives, and there was nothing left but silence and despair. Then, in the midst of this hopelessness, a signal came. It was weak at first, barely a whisper in the dark, but it grew louder as if someone was reaching out. It was not encrypted or coded in any way. It was a simple, human voice. The Zareth fleet commanders paused, unsure of what they were hearing. Humans. It couldn't be. The humans were a species barely known beyond their own star system. What could they possibly offer? The Zareth had heard the rumors about humanity's resilience, but that seemed like little more than a legend. Yet here it was, an offer to help from a species they had written off as primitive. The message was clear. We're here. We can help. Confused and skeptical, the Zareth fleet commanders decided to respond. They had nothing to lose. Moments later, a human cargo ship, the Morningstar, appeared on their radar. It was small, old-fashioned, and completely out of place among the sleek, advanced ships of the Zareth. The humans aboard the Morningstar made no demands, no threats, just an offer to help. Captain Eli Turner, the leader of the small human crew, spoke calmly over the communications channel. "We've come to fix what's broken. No strings attached." The Zareth officers exchanged uncertain glances. This was a strange moment. The humans' presence, however unexpected, gave them something they hadn't felt in weeks: hope. When the humans docked with the flagship of the Zareth fleet, the crew was astonished by what they saw. The humans stepped out of their ship carrying basic tools, crates of supplies, and something else: confidence. They moved with purpose, and though they were outnumbered, they spoke like they had already decided the outcome of this encounter. The Zareth officers watched in silence as the humans went straight to work. They didn't hesitate. They didn't ask for permission. They just started fixing things. The humans worked on the engines, the life support systems, and the communication relays, all with a calmness that the Zareth found both strange and impressive. It wasn't that the humans were more advanced in technology. They weren't. But they had an instinct, something the Zareth had lost: imagination, ingenuity, a willingness to try things no one else would dare. Captain Eli Turner didn't look at the Zareth as enemies. He didn't see them as a threat. To him, they were just a people in need of help, and the Morningstar was here to give that help. The humans didn't care about the politics of the situation or what the Zareth had done in the past. They simply saw broken systems and people in distress, and they couldn't leave them to die. In the first few hours, the humans had managed to repair the basic life support systems. They found workarounds for the broken parts, making use of whatever was available. The Zareth engineers watched in disbelief as these primitive humans fixed problems they had deemed unsolvable. It was almost as if they were rewriting the rules of engineering right in front of them. But it wasn't just the technical repairs that surprised the Zareth. It was the way the humans interacted with them. They didn't act like conquerors or mercenaries. They acted like friends. The human crew shared their food with the Zareth. They told jokes, laughed, and played games to ease the tension. At first, the Zareth were wary, but soon they found themselves curious. Why weren't the humans acting like everyone else in the galaxy? Why didn't they care about power or conquest? They had come across the stars to help, not for glory or wealth. They had no hidden agenda. They simply wanted to help. As the repairs continued, the Zareth began to see the humans in a new light. They were not the weak, primitive species the galaxy believed them to be. These humans had something no one else seemed to possess: resilience, compassion. They didn't give up, no matter how tough things got. The humans didn't have the technology of the Zareth, but they had the will to succeed. And that was something the Zareth had lost long ago. But as the days passed, word began to spread. Other alien empires in the galaxy have been watching the Zareth, and now they were watching the humans. The rival factions who once considered the humans insignificant were now growing concerned. The idea that humans had not only saved the Zareth Armada, but had done so without any expectation of reward was spreading like wildfire. Some saw it as an act of bravery. Others saw it as an act of wisdom. But everyone had to admit one thing: the humans had done something no one had expected. They had changed the game. The galactic powers that once dismissed humanity as a threat were now asking a new question. Could humanity be more than just a minor player in the galaxy? Could they be allies? The Zareth, for their part, were still coming to terms with what had just happened. They had expected their rescue to come from a powerful empire, but instead it had come from a small, resourceful species that had no reason to care about them at all. The idea was hard to grasp, but it was undeniable. The humans had done something no one else could have done. They had saved them, and in doing so, they had shocked the galaxy. The morning stir didn't stay long. Once the repairs were finished, the humans prepared to leave. There were no grand speeches, no promises of alliances, just a simple farewell. Captain Turner left a message for the Zareth before he departed. "You'll be fine now. We'll be out there if you need us. Just remember, help is always around the corner." As the human ship vanished into the stars, the Zareth were left to reflect on everything that had just happened. The humans had shown them what it meant to be brave in the face of despair, and in doing so, they had left a legacy no one would ever forget. The galaxy would never see humanity the same way again, and neither would the Zareth. The stars above the planet of Solara flickered like tiny beacons of light, distant and uncaring. Below, a small human colony struggled to survive in the harsh wilderness of the planet's outer rim. Solara was a beautiful world, but it was also a dangerous one, filled with unexplored territories and hidden dangers that seemed to emerge from the shadows at any moment. The human colony was barely a speck in the vast expanse of the galaxy, yet it had attracted attention that no one on the planet could have anticipated. It wasn't just the colonists who lived there. Something far more mysterious was watching from the darkness. The colony, known as Earth Base 11, had been established by humans seeking to expand their reach into new frontiers. The people there were simple: farmers, engineers, scientists, all working together to build a new life in an unfamiliar land. But things were not as peaceful as they seemed. Strange occurrences had been happening ever since the base was set up. Equipment malfunctioned without explanation, crops failed unexpectedly, and there were reports of shadows lurking just outside the colony's perimeter at night. No one could explain it, and no one dared to speak of it too openly. Rumors began to spread that they were being watched. At first, it seemed like just paranoia, a byproduct of living in an unknown world. But when several of the workers disappeared without a trace, those rumors began to take on a more frightening tone. Captain Maria Garcia, the leader of Earth Base 11, tried to keep calm. She was used to facing danger head-on, but the fear creeping into the hearts of her people was unlike anything she had ever experienced. It wasn't a fear of predators, or even a fear of the harsh conditions. It was something deeper, something more unsettling. There were eyes on them, and they didn't know who or what was behind them. She had sent out search parties to find out what was happening, but each time, the searchers came back empty-handed, or worse, they came back different. Their faces were pale, their eyes wide with terror, and they couldn't explain what they had seen. It was as if the very land they stood on was alive, watching them, waiting. One night, while Garcia was in her office reviewing reports, an urgent message arrived from one of the patrols that had been sent to investigate the farthest edges of the colony's borders. The message was short, frantic, and nearly incomprehensible. "We saw them. They're not human. They're watching us. They're everywhere." The transmission cut off before Garcia could respond. She didn't hesitate. She gathered a small team and set out immediately to find out what was happening. As they moved deeper into the wilderness, the atmosphere grew thicker, the air heavier with each step they took. The trees seemed to close in around them, and the sounds of the jungle grew distant, swallowed by an eerie silence. The team felt the hairs on the back of their necks stand on end, but they pressed on, determined to uncover the truth. As they approached the location where the last transmission had been sent, they found the remains of the search party. They were alive, but barely. Their bodies were covered in strange marks, as though something had been watching them closely, moving with them through the jungle. One of the survivors, a young engineer named Caleb, was able to speak, but his words were shaky and filled with terror. "They have been watching us all along. They're not from here. We're in their territory." Captain Garcia's mind raced. Who were these beings? What did they want? And why had they been waiting for the humans to make their move? The answer, she realized, was much darker than she could have imagined. The creatures that had been watching them weren't just observing. They were planning. They had been gathering information, learning the humans' weaknesses, waiting for the right moment to strike. Returning to the base, Garcia ordered an immediate lockdown. The walls that once felt like a safe haven now felt like a prison. Every creak and groan of the building sent chills down their spines. As night fell, the web of watchful eyes grew tighter, and the silence became unbearable. No one could sleep, knowing that something, or someone, was out there, observing them, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal itself. It wasn't just the jungle that was alive. It was the entire planet. Solara had eyes, and those eyes were focused on the colony. The only question that remained was why. Days passed, and the tension within Earth Base 11 grew to a breaking point. As the colonists began to turn on each other, suspicion clouded their every move. Who among them could be trusted? Were they all being watched? Even as they huddled in the safety of the base, they couldn't shake the feeling that something was drawing closer. The eyes of the unknown beings seemed to grow sharper, more focused with each passing hour. Then, one fateful night, the ground shook. It wasn't the tremor of an earthquake or the rumble of distant storms. This was something different, something deliberate. The entire base seemed to tremble as though it was caught in the grip of an unseen force. The lights flickered, and in the darkness that followed, the creatures made their presence known. They emerged from the shadows, silent figures, their forms shifting in the low light. Their eyes gleamed like the stars themselves, and their bodies were a twisted blend of organic matter and something far more alien. Captain Garcia's heart pounded in her chest as she watched the creatures move. They weren't attacking yet, but their presence was undeniable. The humans were not the invaders here. They had simply stumbled upon something they were never meant to find. The beings had been living on Solara long before humans had ever set foot on the planet, hidden in the depths of the jungle, concealed by the thick foliage, and watching silently as the humans built their colony. Garcia realized that the creatures didn't want to destroy them. Not yet. They were too cautious. They were watching, waiting for the right moment to strike, waiting for humanity to make the first move. It was a game of patience, a web of tension and strategy. The humans were the prey, and the beings were the hunters. But just as the creatures were closing in, Garcia made a decision. She couldn't wait any longer. She ordered her team to launch an offensive. It wasn't a plan that made sense. It was an act of desperation. She had to show them that humanity wasn't helpless. They had been watching too. And it was time to take back control. The battle that followed was chaotic. The creatures, fast and deadly, struck without mercy. But the humans fought back with everything they had. It was a clash of two forces, one ancient and patient, the other young and determined. The jungle around them erupted in a storm of noise and movement, and for the first time since the creatures' arrival, the humans had the upper hand. The creatures had underestimated the willpower of humanity. They had thought humans were weak, insignificant, but in their desperate fight for survival, the humans had shown them just how wrong they were. In the end, the creatures retreated, disappearing back into the shadows, leaving behind only silence and a colony that had survived the most terrifying of encounters. The web of watchful eyes had been broken, but Captain Garcia knew it was only a matter of time before the creatures would return. They would be watching again. And when they did, humanity would be ready. Captain Eliza Ross sat in the dimly lit command center of the human warship Orion, staring at the vast stretch of stars outside. It had been weeks since they had last received any communication, and the silence from the rest of the galaxy was unnerving. Humanity had ventured far beyond their home system, reaching uncharted territories, hoping to establish their presence among the stars. But the farther they went, the more they felt isolated. No messages, no signs of life, just endless stretches of cold, empty space. The crew was restless, and Ross could feel the pressure mounting. She glanced at the main console, where a blinking light caught her attention, a signal from an unknown source. It was faint, buried beneath the static, but there was something familiar about it. A message, perhaps. She quickly gave orders to decode it, but as the first words began to appear on the screen, her heart skipped a beat. The message wasn't just any ordinary communication. It wasn't a distress call, nor was it from a human vessel. It was a single cryptic phrase. They are watching. The end begins now. The words seemed to hang in the air, heavy with meaning, as if they had come from somewhere far darker than the reaches of the galaxy. Eliza's mind raced. Who could have sent it? Who was watching? And what did the end mean? She immediately called a meeting with her senior officers. The message had already begun circulating among the crew, and whispers were spreading quickly. Some of them thought it was a prank, something to lighten the mood. Others, like Lieutenant Sanders, a seasoned officer with years of deep space experience, were more cautious. This could be a trap, he warned, his face pale. Whoever sent it might be luring us into a false sense of security. Ross nodded thoughtfully, but there was a part of her that couldn't ignore the chill running down her spine. There was no way this was a simple joke. The phrasing was too precise, too intentional. She ordered an immediate analysis of the transmission's origin. As the crew worked to trace it, the tension on the ship grew palpable. In the meantime, Eliza couldn't shake the feeling that something far more sinister was at play. Days passed, and every effort to uncover the source of the message seemed to hit a dead end. The transmission had been sent from a location far outside their current position, somewhere beyond the known reaches of the galaxy, in a section of space thought to be devoid of any life or activity. And yet, despite the distance, the message had found its way to Orion with alarming precision. Captain Ross spent long hours in her quarters, poring over the coordinates, trying to make sense of the puzzle. The end, the message spoke of, gnawed at her thoughts. Could it be a warning? Were they about to stumble upon something far worse than they could handle? And if so, was it too late to turn back? Then, late one night, something even more unexpected happened. Another message appeared, this one even more cryptic than the first. It was brief, almost urgent. You are not alone. Trust no one. The Watchers are coming. The words sent a cold shiver through Eliza's spine. The phrase "trust no one" echoed in her mind, and for the first time since she'd taken command, she felt the weight of isolation crushing her. Who could they trust? If they were not alone, then who, or what, was out there watching them? The message spoke of Watchers, but they had no idea what that meant. Were these other beings, enemies they had yet to encounter, or something even more terrifying? As the crew scrambled to decode the new message, Eliza made the decision to change course. The uncertainty was unbearable. They had to find out what was out there, even if it meant heading into the unknown. With the coordinates now locked in, the Orion changed its trajectory, venturing deeper into the mysterious region of space. The tension among the crew grew as they neared the location marked by the messages. Whispers and rumors spread like wildfire. Some feared that they were being drawn into a trap, while others began to suspect that they had stumbled onto something far older and more powerful than they could imagine. The journey was long, and the feeling of being watched grew stronger with each passing day. Every sensor on the ship seemed to detect something, but nothing substantial ever showed up on the scans. The crew felt it, though. It was as if the very stars themselves were holding their breath. The silence was oppressive, and every small noise, the hum of the engines, the creak of the ship's hull, sent the crew into fits of paranoia. Eliza herself couldn't shake the feeling that something was closing in, just out of reach, waiting. Finally, they arrived at the coordinates. A vast nebula loomed before them, an expansive, swirling cloud of gas and dust, the kind of place that any sane crew would avoid. But the message had led them here, and they had no choice but to proceed. The Orion crept into the nebula, its sensors struggling to cut through the dense clouds of gas and debris. It was impossible to see anything beyond the ship itself. But then, without warning, the ship jolted violently, as if something had collided with it. Alarms blared, and the crew scrambled to their stations, trying to regain control. But no matter what they did, the Orion was being pulled deeper into the nebula, its systems failing one by one. As panic set in, Eliza's mind raced. The words of the message replayed in her head. The Watchers are coming. Could this be it? Had they unwittingly walked into a trap set by the mysterious beings who had been sending the messages? Suddenly, a strange light pierced through the nebula, illuminating the area around them. It wasn't the typical glow of distant stars. It was an eerie, unnatural light, as if something was watching them from within the heart of the nebula. In the silence that followed, the crew could only watch in awe and fear as a massive, shadowy shape emerged from the darkness, far larger than any ship they had ever seen. It moved slowly, deliberately, as if sizing them up. The Orion was now at its mercy. But before Eliza could give an order, a final message flashed across the screen. You have been chosen. Welcome to the end. Eliza's heart raced as she realized what had just happened. The message wasn't a warning at all. It was an invitation. They were no longer just explorers in the vast emptiness of space. They had been drawn into something far greater, a game that spanned the reaches of the universe. And now, there was no turning back. The galaxy had always been vast, its countless stars scattered across the dark expanse like distant beacons of hope or despair. For generations, humanity had looked up at the night sky, wondering what lay beyond. They had explored, expanded, and encountered countless alien species, but there was always one truth that remained. Humanity had never been the most powerful force in the galaxy, yet that was about to change. No one knew how it happened, but one day, everything shifted. It started with a strange signal, a whisper that cut through the silent void of space, a message that wasn't meant for any one species, but for everyone. The galaxy felt it. Humanity felt it. Captain Mia Drayton of the human warship, Eclipse, was the first to receive it. She sat in the command chair, her fingers dancing across the controls as the message flashed on the screen. The transmission was unlike anything the ship's sensors had encountered before, pure, clean, and devoid of interference. But the content was cryptic. The balance is broken. The new age has begun. The words echoed in her mind, stirring something deep inside her. It wasn't the first strange message humanity had encountered, but this one felt different. There was an urgency in it, a warning, and yet it also felt like a call to action. Mia called her officers to the bridge to discuss the strange transmission. They gathered around, each one as puzzled as she was. What does it mean? Lieutenant Harrow asked, tapping his fingers nervously against the control panel. Who's sending this? And why now? The officers exchanged glances, their faces marked with uncertainty. The galaxy had always been full of threats, ancient forces lurking in the shadows, but no one had ever seen anything like this before. The message seemed to come from all directions at once, as if it was everywhere and nowhere at the same time. It was impossible to trace. We need to find the source, Captain Drayton said, her voice firm. Whatever this is, it's important. We can't afford to ignore it. The crew worked through the night, trying to decipher the message, but it only led to more questions. Who could send such a signal? Why was it directed at humanity, and why now? As the Eclipse moved deeper into the unexplored regions of the galaxy, Mia could sense that something was changing, something far greater than anything they had encountered before. Days turned into weeks, and the crew began to feel the strain. The galaxy felt different, like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The stars themselves seemed dimmer, the ships passing through space slower, and there was a growing unease among all the species. Mia kept a tight grip on her crew, but she could feel the uncertainty gnawing at them. And then, the first sign of the galaxy's transformation came. It wasn't an attack or a confrontation, but something far more terrifying. An entire fleet of alien ships appeared in their path. The ships were massive, unlike anything humanity had seen before. They were ancient, their designs strange and otherworldly, but it was not the ships themselves that unnerved Mia. It was the message that accompanied them. The age of peace is over. The balance will be restored. The words blared across every frequency, making it impossible to ignore. The galaxy was no longer the same. There was a new order forming, one that humans had never been a part of. These ships, with their incomprehensible technology and their ominous message, were a signal that the galaxy's power structure was about to change. Mia ordered the Eclipse into high alert, but no one knew what to do. The fleet of alien ships moved silently, observing, never attacking. It was as if they were waiting, biding their time. The crew watched, tense, as the fleet grew larger with each passing hour. It was clear that something had awakened in the galaxy, something that was reshaping everything. Suddenly, without warning, a new message appeared on every screen in the galaxy. This time, it was even more cryptic, yet chilling. The Watchers have awoken. The final choice is yours. The message was sent from a place so far beyond known space that no one had ever considered it. It was as though the fabric of the galaxy itself had changed, pulling forces together that no one had expected. Humanity's place in this new galaxy was uncertain, but one thing was clear: the rules had changed. Captain Drayton stared at the screen, her mind racing. The Watchers had awoken, but who were they? And what was the final choice? As the Eclipse sailed further into the unknown, a feeling of dread filled the air. The crew could sense that they were being drawn into something far beyond their understanding. The stars seemed to flicker, and space itself felt tighter, as if the universe itself was shifting. What had once been familiar now felt alien. The weeks turned into months, and the galaxy began to change in ways no one could explain. Old alliances dissolved as new ones formed. Some species, once allies of humanity, now looked at them with suspicion, as if they had been given some ancient knowledge that humanity had not. Others, once enemies, seemed to accept the message, recognizing that the balance had shifted in a way they could not comprehend. The galaxy itself was no longer the same, and humanity had become part of a game that no one understood. Then, one fateful day, the Eclipse received the final message. You have been chosen. The galaxy will never be the same. It was an order, a command, and a promise all rolled into one. Humanity had been swept into a new era, one that they were not prepared for. The balance had shifted, and now, the Eclipse was not just a ship. It was part of something much larger, an experiment, a trial, a test. The galaxy was no longer a place of peace or war. It was a battleground for something much more ancient, something far more powerful than anything humanity had ever imagined. Captain Mia Drayton stood on the bridge, staring out at the endless expanse of stars. The galaxy had changed. There was no going back now. And as the crew prepared to face the challenges ahead, one thing was certain: humanity's future had been rewritten. The unknown had become the known, and the galaxy would never be the same again.